What's up, Degenerate Nation? Welcome to the Big Bets on Campus podcast. This is the weekend college basketball betting preview. I'm Stuckey, and joining me, as they do each and every Thursday, my fellow BBOC co-hosts, Mike Calabrese and Greg Waddel. As always, we will get to a week that was recap, some good and some bad. We'll add a futures bet to the portfolio. We'll throw it to Tanner for his Am East Minute, and then we'll give out some weekend looks for Friday, Saturday, and even possibly Sunday. So, gentlemen, let's get right into it. Let's start with the positive. Greg, I'll go to you first. What do you got?
I'm so impressed with Texas Tech, and it's a team that I haven't spent much time talking about anywhere this year. I've enjoyed watching them kind of quietly, but honestly, I figured that they would sort of falter as Big 12 play got here, and they had to go up against the best of the best. They have done the opposite. They had the best week in the sport in the last 7 days, in my opinion. Stomping Baylor at home, that overtime win against Houston where they had so much adversity they had to overcome. JT Toppin ejected 4 minutes in. One of the most absurd calls I've ever seen, throwing out a player of his caliber 4 minutes into a game on a flagrant. Darion Williams fouled out as overtime started in that game. Nobody would have looked twice if they lost that game, and instead Chance McMillan was just spectacular. They got dudes. Elijah Hawkins is a winner, I think. Christian Anderson's emerging off the bench. They really go, I think, 6 deep in extremely quality players. They've got 6 guys that feel like Big 12 caliber starters, and I think it's time to take McCaslin seriously, because one thing I love with emerging coaches is when they can build different team builds and experience success. And at North Texas, he built a lot of great defenses. At Texas Tech, he's built 2 great offenses. They're 2-0 right now against the 2 teams at the top of the Big 12 standings, Houston and Arizona. And I feel like this is a legitimate contender, a team I wouldn't be surprised at all if they go to the Final Four. I was wowed by them this week.
I agree, and you have to remember that, Williams dealt with a little bit of an injury, and Toppin missed 4 games earlier this season, and then was ejected against Houston. One of those was a loss to Texas A&M on a neutral court. Toppin's, I think, a first-round draft pick, so they checked that box as well, with like a pro talent that can carry them. I love this Texas Tech team. And if you look, so historically what you want from a national title contender is, like, my rule of thumb has always been, you got to be a top 25. You have to be a top 25 team in overall adjusted efficiency, but your total of your offensive and defensive can't be over 50 combined. I think the one exception to that, most national championships have an offense and a defense that are in the top 25. The exception was UConn in 2014. And I'm talking end of the season, regular season efficiency metrics. So the teams that qualify to win the national championship right now: Auburn, Duke, Houston, Tennessee, Florida. I'm going to throw out Alabama's it's close, but they're 4. I don't trust their defense. Purdue, Texas Tech, Kansas's offense, I'm not sure. I mean, they're 36th right now. Iowa State, Arizona, Texas A&M's offense is on the fringe. And believe it or not, Illinois and Maryland, and believe it or not, Marquette, and then Michigan. So I don't know if I see it with Marquette, but so yeah, they're right in that list. I mean, they're 11th in adjusted offensive efficiency, 27th defensively, but since December 1st, they're in the top 20 in both. I think this team is top 6-7 team in the country. And McCaslin, the defense was a bit of a worry early on in the season, but I think that they're improving in that aspect. And yeah, they have shooters. They could beat you in multiple ways and then with Toppin and Anderson's emergence, this team is super dangerous. Calabrese, I'll go to you.
Let's just go straight to the McHale Center on Saturday for who's going to play Texas Tech, because I'm super impressed with what Arizona has done. I know that it was easy to write them off. They start 5-5, but when you look at those losses, all of those losses probably came to top 8 seeds. And since then, they've been an absolute heater. They're 16-6 straight up, 5-1 against the spread in their last 6. And the Big 12 in general is so deep. There's probably going to be 5 teams that are going to be top 4 seeds. So it's easy for the Wildcats to get lost in the shuffle. But when you look at some of these wins, it's not just that they're stacking dubs. They win convincingly in Morgantown. They handle Baylor by double digits. That overtime thriller against Iowa State, there was a ton of luck involved there. But at least they go 15 rounds with the Cyclones. They get the win. And then when you look at some of the roster movements and the lineup changes, that's really been the story within the story for me. Anthony Del Orso is really the X factor, because when he starts, they're 11-1 straight up. When he plays north of 15 minutes, he gives them really good spacing. Evan Mia points out that when he's on the floor, it's the number 1 rated lineup for the Wildcats. He gives them a lot of versatility from 3-point range, as a Campbell transfer, really playing his way up. And also worth noting, Henry Vassar is the 3rd most improved player in the entire country from preseason player projections by Evan Mia to where he is today, at a position of need, because the post-Krivas injury, they need someone to step up to make sure they didn't fall off a cliff in terms of interior defense or rebounding. They've done that. So massive game at the McHale Center on Saturday. I'm really looking forward to it. This is what February going into March is all about. You want to see these heavyweight fights. You want to see really how this pecking order ends up shaking out in the Big 12. And if Texas Tech is what you guys claim that they are, I think they should be able to go in and win this game in Tucson. And I'm just really excited to see it, because I'm high on both of these teams at this point.
Yeah, Visar was incredible against BYU. I thought Arizona I had BYU in that game. I'll go spend my imaginary CLV that I had in that game at the store later today. I thought Arizona had a good defensive game plan too. Usually they're very conservative and let you shoot, and they got up into BYU's face and didn't really let them get comfortable. So yeah, I do agree that they're not as at risk of Caleb Love shooting them out of a game, but it could still happen for sure. But when he's on, and he's very streaky, they become super dangerous. For my good, I'll go. How about I got to give credit to Arkansas for backing up that win at Rupp. Go tough spot, go down to Texas and really dominate that game. We are an Arkansas win over Alabama on Saturday, away from having all but LSU and South Carolina favored to make the tournament from the SEC, which is pretty insane. There would be 12, I think. All right, Auburn, Alabama, Florida, Texas A&M, Missouri, Tennessee, Ole Miss, Kentucky, Mississippi State, Vanderbilt, Texas, Georgia, Oklahoma, and Arkansas. Yeah, we could have, by the end of the weekend, there could be 12 teams from the SEC that are favored to get into the tournament. What if South Carolina or LSU wins the SEC tournament? Not happening. And then I got to give credit to Kadari Richmond. If his offensive game over the past 2 weeks has really helped. I mean, he obviously hit the game winner against Providence, and if he can find consistent offense like that, like he's been showing of late, that'll go a long way for St. John's, who their defense is so good. They swarm you. It is just nonstop pressure in your face for 40. But the problem is they go through too many scoring droughts. They miss a million free throws. But if he can give them more consistent offense, that's going to go a long way for a St. John's team. That obviously their defense is going to keep them in the game against anybody in the country. But was really impressed with Richmond and Arkansas for sure. Let's move on to the bad. I'm going to say Kentucky. This team. Lamont. They need Lamont Butler first of all, because you can just pressure them, and he helps on the defensive side of the ball. I'm not sure when he's going to be back, but they're basically playing without a true point guard. But their defense is not getting any better, and they're now outside the top 100 in overall adjusted defensive efficiency. They also aren't great on the glass, and they give up a ton of threes. Like they can't really defend anyone. It's basically so when like this is a brand new Kentucky team, but last year this is a team that was an elite 3-point shooting team, top 10 in adjusted overall efficiency, offensive efficiency, outside the top 100. So they were 7th offensive efficiency, 109th in defensive efficiency. This year, they're 2nd in offensive and 108th in defensive efficiency. So this is basically the same team that's ripe for an upset against the mid-major that gets hot from 3. And it's not like they're going to crush them shot volume-wise. The one difference is Pope won't get like out-coached, and he'll make better adjustments if they face like a wonky zone or something. But this Kentucky team, they need Butler back. But even when they do, I'm having flashbacks to the last 5-6 years here in Lexington where we'll just lose in the first round to a mid-major.
Stuck, I want to add to the efficiency oddity that Kentucky's nearly identical to last year. Mark Pope's old program is also nearly identical to last year. In fact, before this Arizona game with BYU, they had down to the decimal the same adjusted offensive efficiency and the same adjusted defensive efficiency that last year's BYU team finished with. They play a completely different style. It's one of the all-time analytical anomalies that I've ever seen. And it's just kind of funny. Like, we swapped Mark Pope, but Kentucky is awfully similar to last year. BYU is awfully similar to last year.
Yeah, right now, well, last year they finished 14th offense, 16th defense. And then this year they're 15th offense, 64th defense. Pretty wild. And then my other rant will just be I hate you, Creighton, and the other Villanova game. And then I had Providence last night. I didn't know Abdur Rahim was going to be out, which was big because they needed his scoring. And then I don't know what's going on with Cardette. And then they get in tons of foul trouble and meltdown late. I hate that Creighton team. Greg, go to the bad or the rant. What do you got?
I need to yell at Ed Cooley for a moment. So I'm sick of Ed Cooley's antics. If you didn't see this, after their most recent loss, which is one of many right now, but they lose by 5 to Xavier at the Cintas Center, competitive game. Okay, whatever. Let's forget about it. Ed Cooley storms directly away from Sean Miller in the handshake line and goes and gets in the face of a fan and just screams and points his finger. The broadcast cuts away before we see the outcome of this. Ed Cooley released a statement and essentially did not apologize. Now, I don't know what was said. If something vulgar was said, I think we would have heard about it by now, a little more on record. We didn't. I don't know. If that happened, I'm sorry. But can he stop being the story for 1 second? Can he put a good enough basketball team together that his team becomes the story for once? Because we're giving this guy an awful large amount of time before we start to talk about the fact that the Big East is awful. It's very easy to win games against the bottom teams in that league. And at a program like Georgetown, if you know what you're doing, if you have some money behind you, you should be able to put a team together. In fact, he has a lottery pick in Thomas Sorber. He has a guard that everyone wanted in the transfer portal in Malik Mack. And the results just haven't changed. I don't get it. You can look around college basketball in much tougher conferences and see coaches like Dusty May, Darian DeVries, Mark Pope that have put together relevant basketball teams that are competitive. Pat Kelsey is doing what Ed Cooley should be able to do against the bottom of the Big East and running through the bottom of the ACC. I don't get it. All I've heard from Ed Cooley this year is random press conference moments where he has to defend antics. He took a shot at Illinois in the non-conference, called them a bullshit program for no reason. I'm just kind of sick of the guy. I think we're seeing his true colors, and he's got the same record as the program he abandoned a year after Providence was significantly better when he abandoned them for Georgetown. I'm over the guy.
Love it. Calabrese, what do you got?
Just real quick, Greg, how many tournament wins does Ed Cooley have? Is it 3, for a guy making this much money, that's usually college football territory where we overpay like a Mel Tucker and make him like the third highest paid coach in America for no reason. But I think that's all he's ever done. He had that one Sweet 16 run and then maybe one other win at Providence. Like, it's embarrassing that I agree with you. Like, he's acting as though he's earned it and he's, beyond reproach. It's absurd. I'm going to stick with kind of a Northeast team that, it pains me to say this, but college basketball is not college basketball to me if Syracuse is totally irrelevant. And after a year and a half, I think it's reset button time for Autry. He's 30-25, trending towards a bottom 4 finish in the ACC this year. They're really struggling to have any kind of identity post Boeheim, the 2-3 zone. They can't force any turnovers defensively. They're unable to throw teams off of what they want to run at all. And it's also baffling in terms of what he's been able to bring in Donnie Coleman, Davis from UDEL, Lampkin. You would think that they'd be able to rebound a little bit with those bigs, but they've done nothing on the offensive glass. And there's just a lot of good, low major, mid major coaches in the Northeast. I know that Syracuse is such a premier prestige job that they probably want to grab a coach that has significant experience, at least at a high mid major. But I think there's lots of good options, and maybe it's time to think outside the box because it's clearly not working. And in the ACC, it's so wide open outside of Duke and maybe one other team that rises to the top in a given year. It's not crazy to say in the portal, make the right hire, get 2 or 3 guys in the portal that fit the system, and all of a sudden you can find yourself a top 6 team next year. I think it's time to pull the plug. Do you think that's too aggressive, Stuck, or do you think that he shouldn't be buying green bananas at this point in Western New York?
No, if I was a Syracuse fan, I'd be rooting for Syracuse to not make the ACC tournament. They're like right on the cut, right? They're like, and then I think if they don't do that, that's such an embarrassing. Like, the ACC is so down, and you don't make the ACC tournament. I think that there might be a change, and I think that they need it for sure before this program falls even further behind. All right, let's get to our futures roundtable. So far, we have Texas A&M. Got good value there to make the Final Four. Iowa State to make the Final Four. You can get a better number now. Or to win the national title. You can get a better number now out there. I think 14-1. We have 12-1. And still don't mind that. Illinois to make the Final Four. This is an interesting one to talk about. So Illinois, from an analytics standpoint, from a metric standpoint, is a national title contender. They don't look like it. But they've also had injuries. They dealt with illnesses, but if their freshmen just hit a wall and they're not going to be able to recover, is this a temporary just hump that they've hit? I mean, they've just been unlucky with a lot of other things. Like you have to go to the rack and you play Rutgers when they have a healthy Bailey and Harper, which never happens. Just things like that. The illnesses that went around, the injuries. They still shot volume kings. They're going to get tons of rebounds. They limit to 3. They have a ton of talent. But is this cooked? Because it just doesn't look great right now. Greg, I know you're very in tune with the Big Ten. Do you have any thoughts there?
Yeah, Yakashonis is just broken right now. He's 4 for 28 from 3 in their last 6 games, and he doesn't look right ever since he returned from that forearm injury and the foul trouble-prone game at Michigan State. He's just been a completely different player. The turnovers are still there. The defensive lapses are still there, but the offensive brilliance isn't. So they're kind of – I think they've taken the role of what we worried Alabama might be at the beginning of the year, this team that wants to win the shot volume game every game, but just can't shoot. I mean, every single guy on this team is shooting like 10% below their career average from 3. I don't think it's time to abandon all stock because if you believe in positive shooting regression, they're due quite a bit of it before the season ends. But it's hard to say you trust them right now.
Yeah. Did KJ come back from his injury too soon? I don't know. It's possible, but he still struggles with like physicality, which leads to turnovers. But yeah, I'm certainly a little bit worried about Illinois, but the upside is still there. And then obviously, if you have a team as talented as the Illini, the draw could also just break right for them to get to the Final Four. That's the big wild card to miss. Do you have any thoughts, Mike, on Illinois?
Yeah, I mean, I voiced my frustration in the last episode where when the threes aren't falling, do you even have another plan? Against Nebraska, they didn't. The second half against Ohio State, they did. The same script was playing out against Rutgers. They finished, I think, 6 for 28 from long range. It's just stop shooting them. The last 8 minutes against Ohio State, you didn't shoot any, and you scored 51 second half points. Like, it's inside of these players, and Brad Underwood is not a dummy. Like, he can pull the right strings and move the right lineups. And even saw Will Riley get some significant minutes, and his productivity, he's basically turning it back to the beginning of the season with KJ being banged up in a shell of himself. So there's ways they can do it. And also the points that you guys are both bringing up, the draw during March Madness, I think that's when he can shine as a coach and the staff can shine, because we saw it last year. They got hot down the stretch. I think it's too easy to sell, but I just wonder if it's time to be doubling down. We already have, a Final Four ticket. Are these numbers getting interesting, or is the bottom still not there for the Fighting Illini? I don't know. I wish we had any insight for what's going on with KJ, even, just a leak coming out of the program just to give him a little cover, because he was just horrific and almost fouled out of that game as well. So he's definitely dealing with a lot. I think beyond just the injuries, it looks like a confidence issue as well in terms of how he wants to play the game.
The one thing I would say in terms of their value, too, if we're like, what are we going to monitor over the remaining month? I want to buy this team come March. I don't know that I would scoop to buy low right now, because I don't know that we're at the bottoming out point.
And their schedule's really hard the rest of the way.
Their schedule's really hard. There's 6 games, 6 losses in the Big Ten. They're 4 games back. Like, they're not playing for anything in the regular season at this point. So I almost envision a world, maybe we get KJ a couple weeks off. They're comfortably in the tournament still. The analytics love them. So, but yeah, just maybe like a let's check on this team conference tournament week and see where we can scoop them up.
Yep. All right, let's get to our weekly futures edition. If you're new, we each give one, make the case, and then we all vote. If it's a tie, you can't vote for your own. I will break the tie. I'll start off. I didn't really love anything on the board, but I still want more of Texas Tech. We already talked about this earlier. So I'm going to go Texas Tech Final Four. 7-1 is still out there. I make this like 5.5 to 1-ish. So yeah, I think that there's still a little bit of that, even though we're buying high, is what it seems like. I'm still a believer in this team. They're not going to take a hit for losing at Arizona. But if they win that game, then you're home against Arizona State, at Oklahoma State, at TCU, home against West Virginia. And then you have Houston at home, at Kansas before an easy finish. But if they win that game at Arizona, and then they could rattle off 5 more easily, well, they'll be favored by, I don't know, 6, 7, double digits at most of the next 5 games. I think these odds are only going to shrink. So I want a piece of Texas Tech. I love this team. I think their defense is trending up enough where this is a real national title contender. So let's go Red Raiders Final Four. Greg, where are you going?
Yeah, I have no notes on the Red Raiders, by the way. I like the pick. Like you said, buy high is my only concern, but I don't mind buying high. Maryland is my pick. I'm also going to make a Final Four. I see the number at 17-1 right now. Stuck, you laid out what we're looking for in title contenders. We're looking for add up offense and defense, and it's under 50. Maryland has a top 20 offense. They have a top 25 defense. I think they are continuing to get better and better. This team looks a lot better to me than they did in the non-conference. They're balanced. They can beat you a variety of ways. I think in the front court, honestly, given how many teams in the Big Ten play 2 bigs, it's kind of gone under the radar how unique their front court combination is of Julian Reese and Derek Queen. When they get out of Big Ten play, there's not going to be many teams they see that are formidable enough up front to handle both of those guys. Reese beats up on teams if you don't play 2 bigs against them. And if you do play 2 bigs, Queen is versatile enough to take you off the dribble and kind of space you out a little bit. But the big thing that's been special with this team over the last 3 weeks, Jacoby Gillespie has hit a new level. 18 points a game, 6 assists a game, 14 field goal attempts. He's hunting shots in the 6-1 stretch that Maryland's had, shooting 41% from 3. That has allowed Rodney Rice and Selton Miguel to essentially run corner to corner and just hunt 3-point shots. They're both making them at an extremely high level. And I think now is the right time to scoop up some Maryland, because you look at this schedule the rest of the season. 7 of their final 9 games against Big Ten are against teams projected outside of the NCAA tournament field. Their 2 big games are at Michigan and against Michigan State. I think they can win both of those games. They have no games remaining against Purdue, Wisconsin, UCLA, 3 teams that are peaking and rolling through the Big Ten Conference right now. I think they're very likely to win 7, maybe 8 of these final 9 games. We're going to look at this team as a top 10 team in the country by the end of the season. And at 17-1, that's double the value we're getting of teams like Michigan State, Arizona, Kansas right now. To me, I put Maryland right in that type of group as teams that can make a Final Four run.
Yeah, and you have, Queen probably at the first-round draft pick?
Easy.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Is Reese second, maybe? Late second?
Yeah, maybe he could work his way in as a glue guy, go through the G League, But I think he certainly has, talent. And also, he's benefiting so much from not being the center of attention and having shooters around him for the first time. Like last year was a disaster in that regard with everyone collapsing to Reese.
Yeah, but that just back to the point of having like a first-round NBA guy, NBA talent in Queen, that always helps to make a deep run. And yeah, I still think Maryland is flying a bit under the radar. By the way, I was looking at a mock draft the other day, and I think I saw like 4 Kentucky players in the top 50. I was like, nothing has changed. Everything's the same. So, all right, good stuff there. I like that one. Calabrese, what do you got?
I'm going with a big swing. Last week I came with, St. Mary's at minus 165 to win the WCC, which, by the way, is looking pretty solid. But I'm going to come with something a lot spicier this time. How about New Mexico to make the Final Four, 75-1? It's simple. It starts with their inside-out talent. Donovan Dent running the point, second among true mid-major point guards in terms of game efficiency rating. So he's someone that impacts the game both as a volume scorer, shooter, someone who can facilitate. He can also rebound a little bit for Richard Pitino. You'll get some of these performances, 34 against Fresno. He'll give you 7 or 8 assists on a given night. He gets to the line a lot, which I think really gives him stability in terms of his scoring. And then you go inside and you get Nelly Jr. Joseph, who can take over the game in 3 separate ways. He has 6 games with 5 or more stocks this year, coming off an 8-stock game against Colorado State. He's recorded a double-double in 60% of his starts this season, including a 15 and 13 gem against Utah State on a perfect shooting night. So in terms of his efficiency against the best of the best, or at least the second best in the Mountain West Conference, the Lobos have looked incredible. And when you think about the seed line right now, you could argue they're at 8 or a 9 right now, a strong finish and a Mountain West Conference tournament title. Maybe they get to a 7. But really, it's just about the projection in terms of which region they're in. You want to avoid Duke. You want to avoid Auburn. Bark Torvik puts them at a 15% chance to make the second weekend. But I think I care more about the random draw of not being in the Tigers or Blue Devils region. And if they're not, I think 75-1 is super generous. This is a team that continues to play well, continues to impress. And I know in the Mountain West, you have a lot of fluky home court advantages. You have altitude and things of that nature. But I think they've proven it throughout the course of the season, neutral floor on the road. And a final nugget from Evan Mia of likely tournament teams to make the field as of right now, teams that are over 85% to make the field. In terms of playing up against quality opponents, the number 1 team, New Mexico. So they got to beat some quality opponents to get to the Final Four. I think they can do it. 75-1 is a phenomenal price.
Yeah, don't hate the price. My only pushback would be
Mountain West Conference into tournament time. Yeah,
we're going to do this again. We're going to fall in love with the mountain. They'll all be gone by Saturday at breakfast. All right, let's vote. 1 for Texas Tech, 2 for Maryland, 3 for New Mexico. 3, 2, 1. All right, we are going with Maryland to make the Final Four. Van Pelt will be happy to hear. Let's go Terps. So 17-1. Is that the? Did you check? Is that the best price around?
I didn't price shop at all. I should have.
Let me see.
Well, Stuck looks that up. I do want to point out with Texas Tech, what's interesting is like there's a absolute world in which they play themselves all the way up to the 2 line. 2, 3, or 4, it doesn't matter as long as they avoid Duke and Auburn. Like if they're in any other region, I don't care what their seed number is. Like if they're there and Florida's the 1, like you're probably going to come in as a co-favorite to win the region, or at least, pretty close in terms of the pricing. So the fact is, like, there's not all that much they can do outside of, I don't think that they can work their way up to a 1 seed, maybe if they run the table and win the Big 12 tournament as well. But assuming that they don't get a 1 seed, it's just kind of the luck of the draw. So the number it's a phenomenal number as long as we avoid Auburn and Duke. So I think that's kind of like the same factor in a lot of these futures moving forward to look at winning separate regions. But certainly there's going to be a huge drop off if they're not in one of those regions, come tournament time. I'm telling you, it could be like plus 150 right there with like a Florida or a Tennessee or an Alabama.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. Yeah, that looks like the best price out there. All right. Let's throw it to Tanner McGrath for his Am-East Minute.
Welcome back to the Am-East Minute, hosted by yours truly, the world's biggest fan of this stupid low major league. Standings as we enter week 5 of America East Conference play. Brian is a perfect 8-0. Maine is 6-2. Vermont's 5-3. Lowell's 4-4. UMBC, Albany, and Binghamton are all 3-5. NJIT and New Hampshire are both 2-6. A big story this week. We're halfway through conference season exactly. Almost everyone has played each other once now, so we're firmly in rematch territory, except for Vermont and Albany. And the Catamounts go to Albany at 7 p.m. Eastern on Saturday. And I do think Vermont gets it done here. The Catamounts have really cleaned up their rebounding and turnover issues, and that'll be a huge problem for the shot volume reliant Great Danes. It'll help keep them out of transition and away from second chance buckets. The bigger problem is that Albany can't hit a jump shot, which has made the Danes super rim reliant, which is a problem against a Vermont team that packs it in and has a Leary Aofale patrolling the paint. Of course, the big question is, can the Catamounts score? The Danes do play drop coverage, and they're a pretty decent three-point denial defense, which can stifle Vermont's 5-out attack. Not to mention, the Cats' offense is just totally and completely broken. That said, Albany's interior defense is equally broken, and I think Vermont can just backdoor cut the Danes to death, which they've been much more willing to do in recent weeks. The most interesting game of the Saturday slate, and my best bet for the Saturday slate, will be the UMBC at Maine under. This will be 2 p.m. Eastern on Saturday. The Black Bears whooped the Retrievers in Baltimore in the first head-to-head meeting, mainly because UMBC couldn't handle Maine's press and threw the ball away 19 times, while Maine shot 48% from 3 on the turnovers. But the most interesting schematic difference here is how Maine responds to UMBC's new zone defense. UMBC has gone entirely zone since the disaster against Maine, and it worked against Albany, Vermont, and Bryant, although Lowell shredded it last Saturday by beating it over the top and with their versatile high post forwards. But Maine is a guard-friendly, ball-screen-centric offense with very limited front-court playmaking options, and I'm still banking on more negative shooting regression for the Bears, so I don't love how they match up with the zone. The last time they faced zone on volume was against Stony Brook, and they scored .72 points per possession. The key on the other end of the court is that Maine has always been able to keep UMBC's offense at bay with their elite transition defense. I think this one stays lower paced, lower scoring. Bryant visits Binghamton, 2 p.m. Eastern on Saturday. I do lean Bryant here, although Barry Evans would have to play. He's been out with the flu for the past week. Binghamton is still a pretty effective downhill rim running cutting offense, but you can't do that against Bryant, which rim funnels and then swats everything. Bryant blocked 8 shots in the first head-to-head meeting. And Binghamton doesn't have a point guard right now with Jaden Lemon sidelined, so they've been running into a huge turnover issue, which has adversely affected their transition defense, which is now the worst in the league. And you can't let Bryant push the ball on blocks or turnovers against you. I think that's a death sentence. Finally, NJIT visits New Hampshire, 1 p.m. Eastern on Saturday in the cellar-dweller battle. And I think New Hampshire can flip the script here and pull out a home win. NJIT snuck past the Wildcats with a 5-point home win in the first meeting, mostly thanks to the typical Tariq Francis heroics. He dropped 19 points and 8 assists in that one with 3 steals. But Sammy Pieces can go off at any time, and he had a rough first game. These two teams are overly reliant on their star point guards. And if Sammy has a good game while Tariq has a bad one, I think the Wildcats can sneak away with the win. I also think New Hampshire can get a slightly better whistle in the rematch at home. NJIT got up 11 more free throws in the first matchup, but the Highlanders typically foul a lot more. So quickly to recap, I will likely be on Vermont heading to Binghamton. I'm going to bet that UMBC at Maine under. I like New Hampshire in the cellar dweller battle against NJIT, and I do lean Bryant when they head to Binghamton on Saturday. Otherwise, thank you guys. Hope to see you next week.
All right, thanks, Tanner. By the way, the stage is set for Super Bowl 59 on Sunday, and the many prop bets still to come. That means now is the perfect time to upgrade to an Action Pro subscription, because only Action Pro subscribers get real-time pick alerts from our experts like Super Bowl prop masters Sean Kerner and Chris Raybon, plus all the tools you need to turn a profit betting in 2025. Right now, new subscribers can get $40 off a year of Action Pro at actionnetwork.com/SB for Super Bowl. That's actionnetwork.com/SB. And that's $40 off for the full year, so you'll be covered for the Super Bowl, March Madness, baseball, NBA, and even next college football and NFL season. So don't wait. Visit actionnetwork.com/SB to get $40 off Action Pro. All right, let's get to some weekend looks. Greg, I'll start with you because you have something on Friday. And I will say it's scary for UConn potentially going up against St. John's with, who's DR's game time decision? Mahaney's a game time decision. What do we know when McNeely's coming back? I think he's close.
I think he's going to play in this game. But
okay, but you like the Johnnies.
See, I am on the Johnnies, so and I hope McNeely plays. I guess it would be a boost for the Johnnies if he doesn't, but I'm really not worried about his resurgence. I feel like there's been some false optimism with him. He's obviously an important player. They need depth anywhere they can get it. He's more important to the offense than the defense to me. People seem to think that this UConn team was like really thriving with him. I just didn't see that. They had the 127th national adjusted defensive efficiency in the country with him, and they were still 24th overall in that span. They're not that different with him in the fold. It doesn't fix their issues as far as guarding the perimeter, and that's what they're going to have to do in this game against St. John's. The athleticism, the way that Kadari Richmond is playing, you have to have elite perimeter defenders that can stick one-on-one in order to really shut him down. UConn does not. It's a perfect matchup. A lot's been made out of Kadari as a UConn killer. He averages 18 points a game. He got a win against the two national title teams. Each of the last two seasons, he's beaten Dan Hurley. It's going to be a lot easier to do it this year. But to me, you just look at how both these teams beat Marquette in the last week. Everything St. John's did in that win is sustainable. That game was played on their terms. UConn was wildly impressive. They shot 63% from three in a game they turned it over 25 times in. And
which is scary, but you're going up against St. John's after you turn it over 25 times against the Marquette pressure.
Yeah, it's over if that happens again. And solo ball, if he goes 7 for 9 from three, you tip your cap if that's how they win a game. To me, St. John's has been demonstratively the better team. They have no answer for Kadari. And if there's a chance here that we get St. John's at plus money, which I think we may, man, I have to bet that.
Yeah, and Connecticut's been vulnerable on the defensive glass. So St. John's is in conference play. St. John's should be able to get to the line a bunch, get offensive rebounds. Now, can they make any free throws? We'll see. Then if you get any threes from St. John's, it's just a bonus. But, yeah, that pressure on UConn, especially with a potentially short-handed backcourt, because, if DR and Mahaney are both out, it's bad. You probably got to play ball more at the point, which takes away his scoring ability. Could get ugly. So we'll see who plays. And I agree, McNeely helps their offense much more than their defense, which is, I think, just going to be a problem this year for UConn. Calabrese, what do you got?
I'm going to go Oregon State as a home dog against St. Mary's. Wayne Tinkle, we all know he's a crafty defensive coach. He loves to fold in zone to what he's doing. He was interviewed recently, and he basically said what we're all kind of begging college coaches to do when their teams are struggling a little defensively. Just to throw out something different, a 1-3-1 zone, just to force other teams to prove that they are prepared, they can beat it. But also, sometimes you can hide a guy who's in foul trouble. It really helps with their, ball screen coverage, the dribble handoffs. And it's put them in a position, I think, to kind of throw a wrench into this run for the Gales because they don't do great against zone. Just, straight out, that 0.94 points per possession. That's the 45th percentile for the Gales. They played Merrimack early in the year, a team that we've talked a lot about in mid-December. They were a 20-plus point favorite. They eat that one out as a 5-point win, 73-68, despite grabbing 17 offensive rebounds. So it kind of showed how difficult it was for them to dissect it. And in the WCC, they don't face a ton of zone other than Pepperdine, and Pepperdine stinks. Like, they have absolutely nothing on the offensive end, whereas Oregon State's significantly better in that regard. Michael Rataj has blossomed in his third year on American soil. The German big's up to 18-8 per game. He's been spectacular in recent wins over Santa Clara and the Zags in overtime. And DeMarco Minor, I think, is the stabilizer for the Beavs in this one. If he cuts down on his turnovers, he can be a great floor general. And the Gales, for all of the things that they excel at, they don't put a ton of pressure on you. They don't force a ton of turnovers. So I'm going to go with the Beavers here. They're 4-0 straight up and against the spread at home in their last four, including that overtime upset of the Zags. I think they keep this one close. I would play this down to 3.5. I'm hoping it's north of 4 and can get the hook.
Yeah, Oregon State has been so much better at home too all year. Hopefully the results tonight go a certain way to help potentially with line value there. Maybe Oregon State losing outright would be nice. But yeah, I had that circle too. St. Mary's zone offense. Even if you look at like some of the advanced metrics, it's ugly. And you saw when Gonzaga went to the zone, they couldn't do anything. By the way, Cowboys, I want to ask you about Friday night. A couple A-10 matchups. VCU Dayton. I don't know the status of Malachi Smith. Can use as many guards as you can possibly use against VCU's insane defensive pressure. Dayton's always intriguing as a home dog, but I mean, because they just are so dominant at home over the years. But it's not like they've been as good this year. I mean, they did beat Marquette at home, but they lost to George Mason. By the way, George Mason's defense. George Mason's like St. John's light. They're like in the mid majors. Their defense is so good, but they'll go through like scoring droughts and then miss a bunch of free throws. So yeah, that's intriguing to me. Dayton, VCU, and St. Joe's. They'll probably be, I don't know, 4 or 5 point favorite at home against St. Louis. And I mean, by the way, St. Louis teams are shooting 23.8% from three against St. Louis in conference play. You would normally think St. Joe's would be a team that can capitalize on that. High variance team. They keep having slow starts. I'm definitely going to look to bet them live if they get down. But St. Joe's should be better than they are. I mean, they've lost 5 of 8. They profile much better than that. But what is going on with, I mean, Fleming's been great, but what is going on with Reynolds and Brown? I mean, Reynolds is shooting 28% from three. This is a guy, we have a good sample size. He's 38% every year. He's shooting 26% from three in conference play. His mid-range is still elite. I think he's shooting like 48% mid-range. It's like, I don't know, 12, 13% over the national average. And I don't know why he can't make a three. Has he lost his confidence? And then Brown, too, he's shooting 31% from three, 31% in conference play. Last year, he was 40% on the year, 41% in conference play. And this is a team they're not as bad as they were a couple years ago under Lang, but they still shoot a ton of threes. Do you have any thoughts on either one of those A-10 games?
The second one, I was shocked when I saw Torvik projected it at St. Joe's -7. I'm not comfortable with that whatsoever based on...
No, you want them to get down. Get down like 12 and then bet them.
you want to grab that good number. And also, St. Louis steals that win at UMass, and that was a game that Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, a.k.a. Larry Blurred, he fouled out of that game. He was a non-factor. So the fact is, I think if he stays on the floor, Fleming has played tremendously this entire year, but I think there's an opportunity to potentially get him into foul trouble or to bring the fight to him a little bit. And Fleming has really kind of covered up the fact that the St. Joe's backcourt has been so up and down. If he gets in foul trouble early, I think that's a real bad omen for St. Joe's to potentially lose this game outright. Having watched so many of their games this year, even the VCU game 3 or 4 weeks ago that I was at in person, like I think it is a confidence issue, to be totally clear, in terms of their backcourt, because they surged at the end of last year. It looked in the A-10 tournament like they found a bit of confidence, and they were and to get all those guys back, and then to have this glow up that Fleming's had this season, you would think that this was the time to punch through into the top 4 of the A-10, but it's not materializing. And for that reason, I just think 7 is way too much. At 5, it's probably a pass, but I think you have the right perspective, Stuck. This is a live number, and really it's only a live number you want to play if St. Joe's goes down 10, which I feel like they do in every single game.
Yeah, and they've come back to win a lot of them. Very high variance team. But yeah, I mean, Reynolds he's shooting 25.7% on non-corner threes this year, which is crazy. And mid-range twos, he's 47.5%. National average is like 33. So it's very bizarre. But if he can get hot, then because their defense has been good. Their defense has been better than I thought it would be. One I'll throw out for this, you got to get this one early. It's funny because college basketball, I think I've talked about this before, but I used to be able to, I would put in a ton of work in the summer in college basketball, and then you'd be able to roll out of bed every day during the season and find 2 to 3 winners based on spots. The spot tax, the premium, the efficiency of the market, how fast it moves is insane. So, and now with college football and then the transfer portal, I haven't been able to really do much advanced work on all of the behind the scenes stuff that I do. So I've been doing that over the past month, just trying to, there's so many more resources now too that are available. So hopefully have a more effective model, looking at more matchup based stuff. And because some of these spots are just crazy. Like the market is so much more efficient now and than it was. So it's definitely much harder to beat overall. I will say, and the reason I bring that up is some of these spots, the market's going to know you got to get them early. And otherwise someone's going to beat you to the punch. Here's one. Let's see. Lehigh. I'm going to stick in your neighborhood. Calabrese. Lehigh's been playing a bit better after losing Higgins. They've started to figure some things out. They're going to get American at home on Saturday. I don't know. Hopefully it opens at like a pick. Hopefully they open as a dog. But I don't think that'll happen. They're off since Monday. They beat Colgate on Monday. And American on Wednesday got blown out by Bucknell. And they're going to hit the road for a second straight game. Rest prep advantage here. And the prep advantage is important against American. Run a pretty complex offense. But American is decimated. Their roster was decimated at Bucknell. They had 2 starters out. Their best player, Rogers, was dealing with the flu. The whole team was sick. Are they all going to be better by Saturday? I doubt it. That's a tough spot. And I think it's a good matchup for Lehigh as well. Like American's not going to crush them at the rim. And you want to talk about a revenge spot. Lehigh against American earlier this year lost one of the most improbable games you will ever see. If you didn't see this, I got to walk you through the play-by-play. Lehigh led 60. Hold on, let me pull this up. They led 66-59 with 28 seconds to go. Foul. American makes both. 66-61. American foul. Lehigh misses both free throws. Lehigh fouls again. American makes both. It's 66-63. American fouls again. 15 seconds left. Lehigh misses first, makes the second. So they're up 67-63 with 10 seconds left. American makes the three. Cuts it to 1 with 6 seconds to go. Lehigh inbound, turnover. American jumper at the bell to win by 1. Incredible. Up 7 with 30 seconds left, losing regulation at the buzzer. So I'm sure they've had this game circled.
And talk about the impact to the line. If they win that game by 8 in DC, and then you look at the game against Navy, it was just a game they were totally off. I think they lost by 25 points or something ridiculous. So you look at this, and now here comes Lehigh. I think it'll probably close under a possession. Lehigh -2, 2.5, something like that. I think in terms of their overall, these are like the middle class in the Patriot League is up for grabs, and Lehigh certainly could play their way into that conversation. I think this is a game that I agree with you, Stuck, in terms of the assessment. They figured things out, but that game was totally improbable. We just talked about that Kansas melt against Houston at Fog Allen, 2 Saturdays ago. That was right on par for just the most absurd loss. And we've all done it, yelling at the TV. Why are you fouling? Why are you giving up any opportunity for buckets with or for points with the clock stopped? But still, to lose that way is just insane.
By the way, any interest in buying high? I mean, all I'm doing this episode is buying high. Any interest in continuing to ride the wave with Kansas State at home against Kansas? I mean, this team's played at like a top 25 level since January 1st. And they had a bunch of new pieces. I think in this new day and age of college basketball, there's going to be some teams that look so bad that do start to figure it out, and then the market won't be able to catch up to them for a while. Could Kansas State be that team? They got down 18-2 in Lawrence, and then pretty much played that. I thought they responded well. And by the way, were they down 18-2? They were definitely down 18-2 at Arizona State and came back to win in a tough situational spot, which was impressive to me. I still think teams are going to eventually make threes against Kansas. I don't think that their perimeter defense is this good. And Kansas State is definitely going to get them up. Rebounding could be an issue. Dickinson's going to get his in this matchup, but I don't know. This seems like I might just continue to ride the wave of Kansas State. You kind of looked hesitant, Greg.
Yeah, I like Kansas State against middle of the pack Big 12 teams. And I guess this comes down to where you put Kansas right now. Because I would listen to arguments that this team's wildly overvalued, but at the same time, they do have top-end talent. It's just the weird lineup stuff that Bill Self's been pulling. And the hard part for me, like you heard Kansas fans audibly booing KJ Adams at home this week. He started Rylan Griffin. He's put him in the starting lineup. I've been begging for that all season. So it feels like Kansas is dangerously close to just clicking if they just go with Mayo and Griffin for 32 minutes each and Griffin makes shots like he did against Houston. So I don't know. At the end of the day, this Kansas State team, I'm very impressed with what they've done. I totally agree. It's a legitimate turnaround here. At the same time, I think it was a schedule-based turnaround where the impressive win was at Iowa State, but man, Iowa State has looked seriously broken since that weird Arizona game. So, outside of that, they beat 3 teams that are not going to be in the NCAA tournament. I kind of want to wait and see this one first because Coleman Hawkins and Doug McDaniel, they're playing such big roles in this turnaround, and those guys have been so erratic throughout their careers.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think I'm going to ride the wave. Greg, what else you got?
I'm going to go in the Big 12, and this may be a sucker bet, I'll be honest, but BYU destroyed Cincinnati. And I watched that game from start to finish. This was about 2 weeks ago. They won by 28 points. They made every three they took. Cincinnati missed every three they took. I understand that that's a good candidate to flip at some point. I don't know that it will. I don't think the Cincinnati team can shoot. I think this is one of those matchups where a team just has the number of the other team. They're bigger at every position. The Cincinnati season has really been a disaster. I mean, they started the season a consensus top 20 team in the sport. That was a miss from everybody here. I don't think this team has all that much to play for. And spot-wise, we get them coming off a win at UCF while we get BYU off a somewhat heartbreaking loss at home to Arizona, where I thought they played well enough in that game to win. Arizona just made some big-time shots in the second half. But I buy that this BYU team has been playing at a high level. They won 4 straight before Arizona. I think they feel a little bubble pressure. They've been in the last 4 in from all the bracketology guys right now. And I think they're going to ultimately get there. This is a good team that's played really well for the last month. Cincinnati, 0 wins versus top 40 opponents this year. BYU's won 2 straight on the road. And back to the point that Cincy can't shoot, 19 consecutive games, they have not hit 40% from 3 as a team. I mean, even bad shooting teams have a night every other month here. They haven't. It's been horrendous. I just think that's who they are, and you've got to make threes to beat BYU. When they didn't in the first game, it was a 28-point loss. I don't think flipping the venue is going to make that up.
I can't figure out BYU. But, yeah, you certainly trust their offense much more than Cincy's. It did look like Mitchell went down with – I thought he was done for the season for Cincy when he went down with his knee, but he came back. That was pretty crazy. Calabrese, you're looking at Clemson Duke. I think this line is opened early on FanDuel. You talk about the market getting more efficient. You have the Thursday, you have these games that are open on a Thursday for Saturday. Let me see. I thought I saw that somewhere. Yeah, 7.5.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to the Big East for my final one here. And this is a revenge spot. I like Creighton. -1 is the line that I've seen. It's a Ken Palm line. It's not a sportsbook line. So we'll see what it actually opens at. But revenge game, as I mentioned, Marquette got them by 8 at home earlier this season. If you look at what happened in that game, Creighton couldn't buy a shot. They shot 22% from 3, 7 for 31. If they shoot well, I mean, Ashworth himself was 1 for 13 in that game. I think they could have won that game. It wasn't like they were overwhelmed. They didn't turn the ball over against the Marquette perimeter defense. Ashworth had 10 assists to 1 turnover. I mean, if you can solve that on the road, I think you can solve that at home. This Creighton team's been very good, particularly at home in the Big East play. 8 straight wins. I think they're a legitimate contender. I do understand Marquette's going to flip back at some point here off this 2-game skid, but man, the reality is this Marquette team's been losing to the good teams in the Big East. I think Creighton qualifies as a good team in the Big East. I think maybe we misjudged a Marquette team that's a little bit one-dimensional. Cam Jones has not gotten out of his slump yet. I don't know that it's coming. They ask him to do so much. It's just a tough workload for him every single night. And ultimately, I expect Ryan Kalkbrenner to get the best of Ben Gold in a way that, you know, he outperformed him in the first matchup, but this should be a dominant statement performance one-on-one down low here. Kalk had 35 and 12 in his last game. If you add Ben Gold's last 3 games together, he has 2 points and 7 rebounds in 73 minutes. He is unplayably awful, and that guy can't come off the floor for Marquette. I like Creighton big here at home. I think it's a good number, good spot, all of that.
Since January 1st, per Torvik in the Big East, if you look at overall ranks, St. John's 16th, Creighton 20th, UConn 37th, Villanova 38th, Xavier 42nd, Marquette 55th. And outside the top 50, their offense is just not there. Theoretically, this should be a good matchup for Jones, but against the Kalk drop. But who's stopping Kalkbrenner inside? Yeah, not really sure. Calabrese, Clemson Duke. Looks like that early line is 7.5, which seems a tad high to me. You do have there's throw in the wrench that Clemson played a triple overtime game, but they do get an extra day of rest and get to stay home. But that might get you a little bit of value after they lost. Maybe maybe this would have been 6 if they won that game because they had been on quite a roll. I'll tell you from my perspective, the first thing that jumps out in that game is an under. under, I don't know, it looks like 134.5. And oh geez, I thought it already was down to 129.5. There's a women's Clemson Duke tonight. I just searched for it. So when I look at these two teams, average possession length on defense, 360th and 364th. I think the Duke 3-point defense has actually been a bit unlucky. This game, there will be no transition. Clemson allows nothing in transition. Duke doesn't either. Clemson wants to slow it down. This game will be played entirely in the half court. And I always struggle with does the legs for the offense or defense get hurt more after a 3 overtime game? But I think there's been enough break. These are college kids that they'll be fine. I just think this sets up for an absolute grinder of a game. And I think Clemson's defensive structure can give Duke some issues. And their offense hasn't been as elite against top 50 opponents. So, yeah, I think that this game is like 58-54 type game. Like I can see it playing out that way, but I think I make it like 131. So 134.5 would definitely be a play. The other thing worth mentioning is that Malik Brown is back, and I think you talked about this last episode, Greg, that the Duke defense with Brown is at another level, and he's back after he missed, I think, 5 or 6 games. But you like a side here, Calabrese?
I like Clemson. All of what you laid out in terms of this potentially being a slog, being a half-court game, that's where I think it's going to go. Clemson's borderline top 40 on both ends of the floor in KenPom. They're the 3rd most consistent team according to Haslam metrics, 8th in Evan Mia for the same metric. I like that in terms of this is clearly the game that you get up for, you put all your energy into, whereas Duke has been cruising. 4 of their last 5 wins have been by double digits. And then there's still the factor in the ACC. Before Duke had this breakout season, there's still the Blue Devils. Everybody's looking up to them. And some coaches, I feel like they do not do a good job preparing for the atmosphere that's around it. Brunell has coached against them so many times. In the last 14 games, he's 8-6 against the spread when facing the Blue Devils. 5 of those 14 games, by the way, decided by 5 points or fewer. I don't think this is a situation where they just roll out the balls for the layup line to start the game, and all of a sudden they're going to throw their hands up and say that they're going to lose it. I think they're going to put in the effort. I think they're going to slow it down. I think all the pressure clearly slides to Duke. No one's expecting Clemson to win this on their home floor. Also, in terms of personnel note, Ian Shefflin is the key because Duke is so good both on the defensive end. They're 2nd in 2-point percentage defense and top 15 in 2-point percentage offense. He cannot get in foul trouble and be pulled off the floor. That's kind of his calling card. He has stayed out of foul trouble really for 2 months, and the only game in that stretch in which he got to 4 fouls was against Miami. He still logged 39 minutes. He's someone that has to stay in there and be impactful and then give them a chance for those 3-pointers to fall. Chase Hunter is making 44% of his triples. As a team, they're top 15 in 3-point percentage accuracy. I know that Duke closes out. And you're not going to hear me say this a whole lot during this show, but just bomb away from 3. Just throw up as many as you can as an underdog in a low possession game. It can really swing it. So I think they hang around at 7.5 is in my target projection for what I need to play the Tigers.
Yeah, I would look that way as well at 7.5. Greg, let me do a quick Big Ten check-in with you ahead of this weekend. There's also a lot of injuries in the Big Ten that are worth noting. I think Northwestern is cooked at Washington if Leach is out. I know Washington is terrible, but I mean, you already lost Barnheiser, and then like they survived that USC game, but Desmond Claude was out. They were up like I think 9 or 10, and they almost blew it. USC doesn't really have a point guard without Claude, and they almost won that game at Northwestern, so that's worth mentioning. USC, they're going to get crushed if Claude can't play at Purdue. Penn State, you're already down Puff Johnson, now Niederhauser is done. That kills them defensively inside as far as rim protection. And Puff Johnson gave them a lot of other things. Iowa is now down Freeman, and you're playing – they're going with like Mulvey and Dembele at down low can't score. If I'm Iowa, by the way, who hosts Wisconsin put up 116 on them earlier this season. They were 21 of 31 from three. Now, Wisconsin has a really good offense, and it's much more innovative now than it was. I do think that there's probably some three-point regression coming. They're shooting 41.6% from three over the past 10 games on super high volume, like over 50% rate. And Iowa's allowing 41% from three since January 1st. Their D's bad, but that's also a bit unlucky. I don't know how they get stopped, though. Like, they're not stopping they're not stopping Tanjay or Blackwell. Like, they're also going to get killed inside. But can they score enough? I don't know. If I'm Iowa here, I play the Sanfords, Harding, Dix, and Thelwell. And then just mix. I mean, you'll just get killed defensively, but you're doing that anyway. Just have nobody protecting the rim. Don't even try it. And then you just spread other teams out and fire away from three. Why not? You're not going to get stops anyway. Try to get even more efficient offensively. I mean, just to play zone on and press. And then the other game is you can pick and choose where you want to go with this. But in the Big Ten, Indiana, can they play up here at home? Maybe a last gasp game that they lose this, they're probably attorney chances are done. They've lost 4 straight. We've seen like their potential, like they can play up to teams. Like they won at Ohio State, they almost won at Purdue. Michigan, meanwhile, I don't love them as a favorite. So they play so many close games. Like Michigan went out on that West Coast trip and bludgeoned everyone.
Yep. But
outside of that, they beat Wisconsin by 3, Iowa by 2. They lost to Wake by 2, but let's stick it in conference play. I mean, even if we go non-conference, Arkansas was a 2-point game. Oklahoma was a 1-point game. Minnesota, they lose by 3 in overtime. Northwestern, you win by 4 in overtime. Penn State won by 4. Rutgers won by 3. Oregon won by 4. Like all their games are close. And part of that is they just give away too many possessions. So it's hard to extend and maintain that lead. We saw that against Oregon. That's how they got back in the game. Indiana, theoretically, it's not a really overly efficient offense. They shoot too many mid-range jumpers, but that's what you kind of can do against Michigan. Is any thoughts on your Wolverines here?
Yeah, that game is made extra interesting by the breaking news that Mike Woodson is expected to retire at the end of the season. So that's within the hour.
May going back to his alma mater.
Right, May back to the alma mater. Indiana's very loud about they are going to make phone calls probably to Dusty May at the top of the list, and that's going to be a conversation. Michigan's 0-6 against the spread in their last 6. It matches what you said with your eye test. They just, even if they outplay somebody, they were better than Oregon for 30 minutes decisively. And all of a sudden you look up, it's a 2-point game with 4 minutes left because Roddy Gale traveled on 3 consecutive possessions. That's a real thing that happened in a basketball game at home. I think you hit on the big thing. Indiana likes to shoot from the mid-range. I mean, Mbako can catch fire. He was on fire against Purdue and Mackey enough to make that close to the final possession. And Miles Rice, I expect a bounce-back performance. Michigan's defense really doesn't do anything to make opposing offenses uncomfortable. I mean, they play a very passive brand of drop coverage that says, hey, over 40 minutes, we'll just be bigger and more talented than you. They're arguably not bigger and more talented than Indiana. So I'm going to like the Hoosiers at whatever number that is. I won't be stunned if they pull the upset, honestly, with a little tactical motivational boost that Mike Woodson's free at the end of this season. And everybody you mentioned is a fade for me right now. It doesn't matter who they're playing. Iowa, Penn State, Northwestern. There's 3 teams in this league that aren't going to be in the Big Ten tournament. And it won't stun me if all 3 of those 3 continue to flounder and find their way out of it.
Yeah, I think Indiana could dominate the offensive glass here too. And one of their biggest issues is turnovers as well. But Michigan doesn't really turn you over because, as you said, they don't really apply pressure. Now, Indiana doesn't force turnovers, which should help Michigan. But Michigan creates turnovers by themselves. I mean, they're 348th in non-steal turnover percentage. It's like they are careless with the ball. Like that, not all of the majority of their turnovers. It's not like they're because of pressure or teams that are up in their face. It's just they give away the ball too often. But definitely an intriguing game. Did you have anything else, Mike?
Yes, I got one more. I got a little Fun Belt Maction Challenge. App State, hopefully they're catching 5 at Ohio. This is the second year of this scheduling alliance. Takes me back to Bracket Buster Saturday, which they still need to bring back. Wonderful contrast of styles here. Ohio, 38th in tempo, 10th in fast break points per game at nearly 16. And they just got their best big back, A.J. Clayton, from an injury. App State, 325th in tempo, one of the best mid-major defenses, particularly closing out on three-point shooters. They're 6th in three-point percentage allowed in the country. Dustin Kearns, with limited offensive upside, has this team playing really well. They're 8-2 straight up in their last 10. Their only loss, well, one of the 2 losses by a single point to Old Dominion in that stretch. Miles Tate at the point for the Nears is a great facilitator. The Butler transfer is averaging 16, 5, and 5. And if that seems like pretty good numbers for a point guard, there's only one other in the whole country that has hit all 3 of those, and that's Princeton's Xavier Lee. So when I look at what he's able to do, it comes down to can App State hold up against the Ohio front court? CJ Huntley is kind of a unicorn in the NIL transfer portal era. He's stuck around. He's a super senior, 5 years in the same program. He finally blossoms here after starting 80 games. He's averaging 15 and 7 for the Mountaineers, and he's been dominant on the glass in the past month. I think it is enough with their defense, with their pace, and hopefully with some inside-out game with their point guard and Huntley down in the low block that they can hang around. I think they cover this number against the Bobcats.
Yeah, Kearns has this defense figured out. You can always trust him. I'm surprised. I think he's eventually going to get a high major job. But the offense is still a major work in progress. But the defense is trending up and only getting better with each passing game. But Clayton back for Ohio is definitely big. I think he had 18 in his return. I
wonder if he's going to be on a minutes restriction. I mean, obviously it's his first game back. He was still really productive. I think he only played 20 minutes or something like that. That's just something to monitor, see if maybe you can find a quote from the coach leading up to it or someone from the staff, a beat writer. Because if he plays like he did at the beginning of the season, he's the best player on the court in this matchup.
Yeah, maybe they don't work him as hard too, since this is a non-conference game too. So you could potentially see that. I'll give you a quick rundown of some others. ECU at UTSA. Man, UTSA blew like an 8-point lead with a minute to go against Tulane somehow. They're dead. But if Primo Spears is out, I think it's a good spot for ECU. Eventually, someone's going to miss a 3 against them. I think they have a good 2-point defense. Teams are shooting like 42% from 3 since the calendar changed. They don't turn it over, which is important against UTSA. They should dominate the offensive glass. Both teams want to get out in transition. UTSA, horrendous transition defense. So especially if Spears is out, I might bite the bullet with UCF and take a big number. They can get buckets in transition against Baylor. They've been unlucky, their 3-point defense, and they've actually been okay on the road. Like they played some really good teams tough. I do worry about the offensive glass for Baylor, but potential flat spot for Baylor here. They just had 2 huge games. You got Houston up next. So I could see UCF hanging around, especially if Edgecombe is out. I mean, he's a potential top 5 pick now. Edgecombe is like at another level. I mean, the first 12 games of the year, he was averaging 11.7 points per game, 28% from 3. The last 8, 20 points per game, 51% from 3. I mean, this guy's incredible. I think so, but I don't know. I haven't seen his status, but the Baylor D, if they're not getting turnovers, is very gettable. And UCF can score and they don't turn it over. So might get a good number there. Big Sky, Idaho State revenge. They went 6 of 27 from 3 against Weber. When they lost, Weber State is bad. I don't know how else to put it. And they're not healthy. They're basically down 2 starters. One has temporarily left the program. Not sure what's going on with the other.
Dylan Darling, appointment television for the Vandals. Dylan Darling.
Oh yeah, 2 good point guards in this game. But I love Darling, and I think this is a good matchup as well. They should dominate the glass shot volume battle here. So I will take Darling. And how about UCSD, the Tritons? It's not a great scheduling spot because they got to play tonight. UC Irvine has had a week off, but they actually match up well with UC Irvine, and I still don't trust this UC Irvine offense. The UC Irvine defense is elite. You got to shoot threes on them. You can't go inside. I know that they do such a good job on 3-point defense, but UCSD couldn't throw it in the ocean in the first game. I think they get their revenge. They gotta change the defensive looks a little bit to stop the big German this time around. But I'll be looking at UCSD on the road. Ugly ones I might look at. Maybe Canisius catching a big number. Not sure if I'll get myself to go there. Maybe Colorado State at home against San Diego State, although it's your extended prep here, scheduling wise. Last one I'll throw out, Little Rock. I don't think Moorhead gets to 50. Little Rock's defense is so elite, and their best rim protector didn't play in the first meeting when they lost. Little Rock has both these offenses are terrible, but Little Rock has major turnover issues, but Moorhead won't exploit those. I think Little Rock completely suffocates Moorhead and gets revenge here. So those are some of the ones I am looking at. Is there anything else I wanted to mention? Oh, Florida at Auburn. Will Clayton play? Is obviously what you have to watch for there. So I'll be monitoring that. He's obviously critical, and they need all hands on deck at Auburn in the jungle. But that should be a really good one as well. Did we miss any of the marquee games, or should that do it? Let's see. Yeah, I think we got most. All right. Greg, anything else from you?
No. Good here, boys.
All right. That'll do it for us. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks to Mike and Greg for joining me. Thanks to our producer, my back end. Most importantly, thanks. Oh, and also thanks to Tanner. But most importantly, thanks to all of you for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe, unsubscribe, tell a friend, tell an enemy. Leave a 5-star review. That's really help us out. Good luck on all of your wagers this weekend. 3-Man Weave will be back early next week. And we'll be back with 2 more episodes after that. We'll catch y'all later. Cheers.